Good morning, I'm John Northcott. You're watching CBC Morning Live. Heather is away. We begin with a secret look inside Afghanistan 1 year after the Taliban seized control again. We're going to show you an underground school for teenage girls. Any education for girls after grade 6 is banned. Their teachers risk a crackdown by Taliban authorities. Education for girls and young women has been a focus of Canadian aid. It was seen as a measure of the generational change after the fall of the Taliban in 2001. In the 12 months since the Taliban recaptured power, there is a widening crisis in the country and an ongoing push to get Afghans who helped Canada to safety. Marina von Stackelberg leads off our coverage with that angle.
1 year ago, this was the scene at the airport in Kabul. Afghans desperate to escape crowd the tarmac and grasp at the sides of a U.S. Air Force plane, some falling to their deaths. American troops and their allies, including the Canadian military, pulled out of Afghanistan.
With the Afghan flag being taken down.
The Taliban had already established power in other parts of the country. It swiftly moved in to take Kabul and control of the country, ending a 20-year war.
That's me right there.
Brian McDonald heads up a group of veterans and former interpreters working since then to bring Afghans to Canada.
We watched that terrible situation unfold. We served in Afghanistan with these interpreters, with many of these people that we're trying to help. And when we were unable to get them out a year ago, it was devastating. But since then, we've come together, we've doubled down, and we've been able to get 3,000 people out.
But it's a slow and dangerous process to get the passports needed to leave.
These people that have helped Canada now have to stand up and go to an office that's controlled by the Taliban and give their name and address and the dates of birth of their children.
This June, Pakistan agreed to a 2-month window. It would let Afghan refugees already approved to come to Canada across its borders without a passport or visa. But so far, few have been able to make the journey.
We were hoping it would be thousands, and it ended up being dozens. We're dealing with the Afghan-Pakistani border, and it's a very wild place, and so messages aren't always clearly communicated. But we believe the window may still be open.
To date, the government says more than 17,000 Afghan refugees have made it safely to Canada. But it's been criticized for abandoning Afghans who assisted Canada in the NATO-led effort. Another 18,000 refugees are still waiting.
I think we can hold our heads up high when we think about our response compared to that of our allies. There's a lot more work to do.
Last month, Canada stopped accepting new applications for its special immigration program for Afghan refugees who helped Canada during the war. McDonald hopes that will change.
We are still grinding away every day, moving people out of Afghanistan. And we're just going to keep doing that until we get as many people out as we possibly can.
Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Afghans who have been able to escape the Taliban are also working to get their families out of the country. Some took part in a vigil last night in Toronto. The organizers urging the federal government to do more. They say Ottawa promised to help 40,000 Afghans come to Canada, but a year later, only half have made it. Hilary Johnstone now with more on what the people of Afghanistan are facing 1 year after the Taliban retook the country. Good morning, Hilary. What do you know?
Good morning, John. Well, today is actually a public holiday in Afghanistan, if you can believe it. The Taliban announcing that to celebrate their 1 year since they have returned to rule. All of this coming at a time when millions of people in that country are going hungry. The UN has estimated that more than 20 million people in that country are facing hunger, more than half the country. And there are some pockets of the country where the level of hunger has now reached what they're calling catastrophic levels. The war in Ukraine, the UN is also saying, is likely going to make that worse through the fall and winter months as access to grain becomes even more difficult. So a very, very dire situation in that country. We've talked about the plight of women and girls. We were showing those photos of women now going to school underground. Now, of course, we all remember those devastating images from about a year ago when people were trying to flee the country, were trying to get out of the country, get out of Afghanistan. We've also now heard from the former president, who himself fled the country, is now in hiding as well, who said that at this point, he doesn't blame the U.S. for leaving in the manner that it did. Here's a little bit of what we heard from him.
I do not have the luxury to engage in blaming or sense of betrayal. Superpowers, big powers decide on the basis of their national interest. What I hope is that they've considered the implications of those.
But John, what we're hearing from the Republicans in the U.S. is that they are blaming how the U.S. decided to withdraw, blaming U.S. President Joe Biden. A new report expected to come out today from them showing what the White House did or did not do in the time leading up to that withdrawal. All of this, of course, meaning that you still have millions of people left in that country who are now facing increasing levels of poverty, and things, it would appear, are only getting worse.
Hillary, despite the fear of living under the Taliban, some women in Afghanistan did take to the streets in protest over the weekend. What can you tell us about that?
They did. It was a remarkable scene. And what we've heard from some activists is that some of those women were detained by the Taliban. We know that they took to the streets, that they were chanting bread, work, and freedom, because a lot of women have not been able to return to their jobs in the years since the Taliban took over, in particular government jobs, speaking about teaching as well. We know that anyone in the grades of grade 7 or above have not been allowed to return to school. That was a bit of a U-turn from the Taliban back in March. At this point, there's no official ban on women going to university, but since they can't go to high school, of course, you can imagine what that is going to do to women's prospects of getting into school. So some really remarkable scenes that we saw over the weekend there, John.
Thanks for this. Hillary Johnstone in Ottawa.